Now you're beginning to see some more of our sketches bringing out the feel, the touch of what he wanted to bring into the park. And you'll see some of the buildings, the L'Oreal building, that's there, of course, the chapel, which he always made sure was a good sketch he made, and so on. Now this I find very interesting. At this point, he had pretty well worked out how the buildings were going to look, and they all agreed to that. But one of the things with Arto was, of course, color. And you might have a building that was looking right, but you also had to have the right colors on it, so that also contributed to the overall feel. And I really love to see this sketch, how he's trying out different color combinations as to how he's going to color the roofs and the other features of the buildings that were painted. And there you are. He's now beginning to get into finished work. This is a finished drawing of what we saw later. Again, here he's down in the corner. That's his color chart, his checklist. So he's there's another little sketch he made. A lot of these drawings that I'm looking at, I think, are part of one of those collections down at the main. And there's a picture of how he first saw the L'Oreal building coming in. That's called a toy shop these days. The L'Oreal driving power make toys. And here we finally have the whole thing together. You can see how close that looked to that original sketch. So, and again, if you go in the park today, you'll see that this is just about the way it is. When they opened in 49, all these buildings were there, except the building with the clock tower on top. That was built the following year. So they actually constructed all of this business in about a year, which in those days was pretty good. We're looking to get a logo. Let's say this workshop for stationery, things of that nature, and this is one of this is actually pretty close to what we've done. Again, the site. As you can see, they selected Whiteface Mountain. Initially, the park was going to be built in Lake Placid. Actually, it was going to be built in land that my father owned that was behind the charcoal pit restaurant, which is going over there. But that was the original site, and where the charcoal pit restaurant now stands would have been the entryway to Sam's Workshop. When Harold Fortune joined the crew, he recommended considering this site, and he was basing it somewhat on the fact that there already was this tourist-oriented traffic going up to some of the Whiteface, which we could appeal from, and he was aware that the ski center was going to be built over there. He felt there was a lot of development over there, which would work out as a nice activity. So they finally decided to come down to Wilmington and do that. Now here we are. This is the site. We're going to do this. This is the first area of the land. Here you can begin to see buildings coming up, being formed. There's the development. The work is going along a little bit further. They got roofs on the buildings. And you can see how it's all taking shape. Now here is one of the completed buildings. This is the blacksmith shop. Initially, of course, they wanted to have these bright colored roofs. That was important. But they couldn't figure out what kind of material to put on the roofs in order to get that kind of feel. And so while they were still researching alternatives, the time was running by, they had to do something. So they covered this with sort of a heavy aluminum foil and applied paint on it. And the first couple of years, so if you see any pictures of our buildings, they got flat roofs on that. like that. Well, that's pictures dated to 49 or 50. By 51, they began to use a product that's well known up here in our country, but not used for roofs. It was brainstorming, which you go on the sides of buildings. And they decided to use that on the roofs because they wanted that shadow line and so forth effect. The only problem with that was it wasn't an appropriate roofing material, and about every 8 years or so, it would all dry rot out, you have to pull it all off and put it all back on again. So every spring you had to repaint the roofs because with the intense sun and cold nights, the expanding the track so much, the paint would just pop right off the roofs. I remember coming down here in May saying, oh, it's so great, you don't have to touch a roof, they're all perfect shape. And then you come back in July and the paint's all flying up in our gym. So we eventually got rid of the brainstorming, and as you'll see on the roof right now is a product that I don't believe is any longer made. It was made by Kaiser Aluminum. It was made at a time when they were looking for products, roofing products out west where the wildfires were, something to do with Nikes. And you could get this in all kinds of colors, and we found it very suitable for our use. And so this has been on for, this present roofing material has been on for 40 years or so. Now there's the building which we is now Santa's house. At that time was going to be designated to be the post office. Again, you see some of the buildings beginning to take shape. You see their starting of trying to do some landscaping in there. The original idea was to try to landscape this park and make it so pretty that way. But then they put into the park all the deer and the goats and sheep. And they took away all the landscaping. And then the park began to get like a butthole after a heavy rain. And so that's why we had to eventually get into storm sewers and paved paths and things like that. I remember in the earlier years, if we had a heavy rainstorm during the night, we brought in maybe 10 or 12 loads of dirt they had to drag in across the street and rebuild the center of the park. And there's Santa. Now this could be open day or close to it. He's ready to take residence. Again, you do notice the greenery. It's no longer there. In the earliest years, the first two gentlemen that filled the role of Santa Claus here was a retired carpenter from Lake Placid named Bill Powell, and another retired, semi-retired businessman from Lake Placid whose name was Arthur Adams. And they, of course, did not have natural white beards, in 1952, we had John Finlayson join the staff, a man that had a natural white beard, and that became our trademark ever since. We've tried our best to keep it that way. Again, it looks like Sam's ready to welcome his first visitors.